The morning I checked my bank account, I expected nothing more than another ordinary balance update. Instead, I found years of sacrifice reduced to a number so small it barely seemed real. Nearly every dollar I had saved was gone. My hand stayed steady, but my heart refused to believe what my eyes already knew. I called my daughter first. She ignored every attempt. When my son-in-law finally answered, his voice carried unsettling confidence. He claimed the money was simply being managed for the family and told me not to worry. Those words felt colder than... If you love stories where karma always wins in the end, subscribe to Karma Effect, The Missing Savings. For the first time, helplessness quietly settled beside me. Then my phone rang. It was my lawyer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Sir, you need to see this before you confront anyone." I became a widower long before retirement, and every decision afterward carried the weight of raising my daughter alone. I worked overtime, declined vacations, and postponed comforts because her future mattered more than my own. Every dollar I saved represented another promise kept. I paid for her education without complaint, celebrated every achievement with quiet pride, and stood beside her on her wedding day believing I had fulfilled my greatest responsibility. When she married, her husband appeared respectful, hardworking, and genuinely thankful for the trust our family offered him. He spoke carefully, listened politely, and never seemed entitled. After retiring, I allowed him to help with a few financial tasks, believing shared responsibility would ease my burdens, not create new ones. Looking back, I realized generosity often hides the first doorway through which greed quietly enters. What felt like loyalty was slowly becoming something else, though none of us recognized the change until far too late. The changes arrived so gradually that they almost escaped notice. My son-in-law started asking detailed questions about investment accounts, online banking access, property deeds, and documents I had always managed myself. He explained everything as careful planning for the future, and I wanted to believe him. My daughter, once eager to discuss every family matter, suddenly grew uncomfortable whenever money entered the conversation. She changed subjects, ended calls early, or smiled without answering. When I questioned unfamiliar transactions or requested account information, they exchanged knowing looks before gently suggesting my memory was not what it used to be. Those quiet remarks wounded me more deeply than any financial loss could. Respect had not disappeared overnight. It had been replaced piece by piece with polite dismissal. Even then, something felt unfinished. I kept remembering my lawyer's whispered warning and wondered what he had uncovered that everyone else had completely failed to notice beneath their confidence. I confirmed the impossible after meeting with my bank. Every major account had been emptied. There was no misunderstanding, no harmless explanation. When I confronted my son-in-law, he leaned back calmly and insisted every transfer had been legal. Then he smiled and said I should appreciate that someone responsible was finally handling my finances. My daughter stood beside him without saying a single word. Her silence echoed louder than his confidence. Days later, during the family dinner, he joked that older people often needed others to think for them. Several relatives laughed politely, believing they were easing the moment. They never saw what I felt. The deepest wound was not the money, but the deliberate erosion of respect. I remembered one truth. The moment people mistake your silence for weakness, they begin writing the ending of a story they never controlled. I quietly stood, wished everyone a peaceful evening, and walked out without another word, carrying my dignity where their approval could never follow again. I followed my lawyer's advice without hesitation. Instead of arguing, I gathered patience. Then he showed me what had prompted his whispered warning. Buried within the financial records were authorization forms carrying altered digital signatures that deserved closer examination. Bank surveillance footage documented who had appeared during key transactions, while electronic access logs created a precise timeline that contradicted every confident explanation my son-in-law had offered. None of it proved everything alone, but together the pieces formed a picture impossible to ignore. Ironically, every careless decision he believed made him untouchable had quietly produced another layer of evidence. I refused to confront anyone again. Silence became my strongest ally because truth rarely needs to raise its voice. Meanwhile, I celebrated the story never realizing the hearing unfolded with none of the drama people imagined to tell. Everyone spoke calmly, and every statement carried consequences. My son-in-law arrived wearing the same confidence he had displayed for months, convinced the paperwork would protect him. My lawyer never raised his voice. He simply presented each record in careful order. The altered signatures were examined. The banking timeline was compared against electronic access logs. Surveillance footage confirmed who had authorized critical transactions. One fact quietly erased, another excuse until the entire pattern became impossible to deny. Across the room, my daughter lowered her eyes for the first time. Regret had finally replaced silence. After reviewing the evidence, the judge ruled that the transfers had been fraudulently obtained and ordered my financial rights restored through the proper legal process. My son-in-law finally understood his greatest mistake. He had never defeated me. He had only underestimated the patience of the man whose lifetime of honest work had built everything he tried to steal. I walked away with my dignity fully restored. Although my daughter eventually reached out, I listened without anger. Apologies can acknowledge pain, but they cannot rebuild trust overnight. I chose peace over bitterness and gratitude over revenge. The money was returned, yet the greatest recovery happened within me. Wealth can always be earned again, but character reveals itself only when temptation appears. That lesson cost me dearly, but it freed me from resentment. Be generous, but never surrender your judgment. Protect your kindness with clear boundaries, because respect begins where wisdom refuses to ignore uncomfortable truths. Quiet strength is never weakness. It is lasting victory. If you love stories where karma always wins in the end, subscribe to Karma Effect.